Hey nerdy knitters, in this video we're looking at slip stitch basics. We'll look at the basics of slipping stitches, knitwise and purlwise, and also how the yarn is held, whether it's held to the front of the work or to the back of the work, and what that means and how you can decipher that in a pattern. First off, let's look at slipping stitches, knitwise and purlwise. You know how to knit and you know how to purl. So if a pattern tells you to slip a stitch knitwise, you would slip it as if to knit. You can also see it in that term. It could say knitwise or it could say slip as if to knit. All that means is insert your needle just like you're going to knit a stitch, but instead of knitting it, you are going to slip it from the left needle to the right. Let's do that again. If something says if your pattern tells you to slip knitwise or slip as if to knit, insert just like you're going to knit a stitch and slip it to your needle. You can see that makes your stitch change its stitch mount. A regular stitch has the right leg in the front. When you slip it knitwise, it moves it and puts the left leg in the front. Now, what if a pattern tells you to slip purlwise or as if to purl? Just the same. You insert as if you're going to purl, and you slip the stitch instead of purling it. So if it says purlwise, you insert as if you're going to purl and slip it purlwise. And the difference between this and a knitwise slip is the stitch mount doesn't change. It's still mounted with the right leg in the front and the left leg in the back. So when do you use each one? There's a basic rule for this. You will use a knitwise slip if you're working a decrease. If you're working an SSK, you slip, slip, knit them together through the back loop. And that makes a left-leaning decrease. Or you could do an SKP, slip one as if to knit, knit one, pass that slip stitch over. When a pattern is working a decrease stitch, then you will slip as if to knit for that. Now for slipping purlwise, that is the general rule for every other case. If a pattern tells you to slip a stitch, you can generally assume, unless it tells you otherwise, you are slipping purlwise with the yarn held to the wrong side of the work. This is most often used in slip stitch patterns. Here's an example of a slip stitch pattern. The yarn was held to the back of the work and these diagonal moving stitches were slipped. Either method can be used for working the edge of a project that's worked flat. In this example, I slipped stitches right along the edge to produce this little rope-like effect. I slipped them purlwise, and that produces that. But you can slip in either direction for an edge like that. So our basic rule is you slip it knitwise if you're working a decrease. You slip it purlwise if you're working a slip stitch pattern, or that's the general rule of thumb. If a pattern tells you to slip a stitch, assume that you're slipping it purlwise unless it tells you otherwise. Now before we get to the next part of our video, I just wanted to pop back in and say I believe you can be a confident knitter, but that comes with understanding what's happening on your needles. And in this video, that means understanding slipping stitches, knitwise and purlwise, and how the yarn is held, whether that's in the front or in the back. What does that mean? Is that the right side of the work or the wrong side of the work? We're going to look at that next. If you believe that understanding your stitches is important, be sure to click the like button for this video and be sure to subscribe if you like to get nerdy with your knitting. Now let's get back to our demonstration and we'll look at the difference between yarn in back and yarn in front and what that means in a knitting pattern. The next part of the equation is yarn in back and yarn in front, or yarn back or yarn forward. This phrase is usually used in relation to what side of the work is facing you. Yarn in front refers to whichever side is currently facing you, even if it's the wrong side of the work. Like this example right here. I'm about to work another right side row and the pattern tells me that the yarn is forward. So I have to bring it to the front of the work while I slip the stitches. And I can see from the pattern that it produces this pattern across the front, having those slipped stitches. So yarn forward in that case is producing the design on the fabric. So in this example here, it's a slightly different pattern. This time my pattern tells me to slip with the yarn in back. So I hold the yarn to the back of the work, or the side that's not facing me currently while I work. Even though I'm on the right side of the work right now, I'm slipping with the yarn held back. But what does that mean when I have to work this on the other side? Let me get there and we will look at that. All right, I'm working across the back of this slip stitch pattern, and I have to knit 2, and then I have to slip with yarn to the front. That does not mean to the front, the right side of the work. That means in relationship to me and the fabric. That yarn comes to the front of whatever side is facing me, and then I slip that stitch, no matter what. One last thing to look at, because sometimes these instructions can be confusing. These are the same exact instruction. You knit 1, you slip 1 with yarn in front, and knit 1. That's the same as saying knit 1, bring the yarn forward, slip 1, bring the yarn to the back, and knit 1. The same instruction is just written 2 different ways. So now you know how to slip knitwise and purlwise, and how to hold your yarn in relation to your project. And if you like to get nerdy with your knitting, be sure to click subscribe down below.